Hi ho everybody and welcome back to D Plus Us Weekly, the show where we talk about shows exclusive to Disney Plus, episode by episode, week by week for our enjoyment and yours. I'm one of your hosts, Griffin Tennell, Griffey D. Padden. With me as always is the wonderful, the amazing Mr. Mitch George, Bright Suns. How are you doing today?
I just finished my water, so I'm kind of sad because now I don't have water while we talk about this. But that's okay. I'll power through.
Yeah, normally we were really good about filling up like water and stuff beforehand. Totally spaced that this
Honestly,
time.
this week, well, we can get into it off camera, but oh my god, this fucking week.
I mean, I still think it's hilarious, just the situation of we're recording a day late today, because
Yeah.
both of us were asleep when we normally record.
Yeah. Although I did start the Jim Henson documentary and proceeded to fall asleep about 20 minutes in. But those 20 minutes were really good.
Yeah. Hey, documentaries are great for falling asleep.
Yeah, don't I know it?
Even if it's like something you really care about. That's not what we're talking about today, though. We're talking about episode 7 today, folks, of the Acolyte choice. The penultimate episode in this show. Definitely a point of contention that we will be talking about on this week's episode. But before we jump into it, some rigmarole for you. First off, hey, folks. Thanks for listening. If you're listening on podcast services, head on over to the YouTube channel where you can see our lovely faces and see the video version of this show and others. You can also check out our normal show where we have an episode up right now all about Inside Out 2. Doing fantastically in the box office.
Good for that movie. Although I do hope this doesn't just mean they're immediately going to greenlight Inside Out 3. Although I would really like Inside Out 3, and I gave my theories for what that would be. But they also haven't done Incredibles 3, and that was the film that this surpassed to get the all-time record at the box office for Pixar. So,
Pixar's creative structure is wild, so anything can happen. But yeah, go check that episode out. Go check out all of our other stuff. As another note, a bunch of stuff should be up on podcast services again. Sorry about that, folks. One of these days I'll be good about that. I promise. No, I won't. All of that said, Mitch, we are one episode out now from the ending of this show.
this season, I still don't.
I still think we're getting another season.
I would like it to, because there's a lot that we don't know.
I want to
know
know individually. I want to know what your thoughts on this episode were, and then I want to know what your thoughts on this episode as the penultimate episode are.
So with this episode, there are some real highs. We speculated when we did when we had our conversation about episode 4. Was it episode 4? Whichever one was the first flashback episode.
That would be episode 3.
Yeah. So when we talked about episode 3, I figured, okay, we got that perspective told from May or Osha, and now we're going to hopefully later on we get the perspective of somebody else, whether it be the Night Sisters, which was officially confirmed here. Check mark for lore lovers. They were the Night Sisters.
They said they were like the Night Sisters. They didn't say they were.
I thought they said Night Sisters.
They were very specifically they're like them, but they weren't them.
Okay, maybe I misheard that. Either way, I thought there was a lot of really interesting things to be told from the Jedi perspective here, and we had some really interesting moments and some things that didn't make a lot of sense. Kelneka, what you doing, bud? You see what happens to Torben, be like, oh, I'll just go in there and get mind control too. Who friggin' cares? And Torben being like, hey, you know what? I miss home, so I'm going to destroy this entire coven of people. Like, the fuck?
Yeah, this episode
highs and lows.
I think this episode illustrates this show so perfectly. Because this show is so different from 90% of Star Wars. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this show, is how different it is. It's a different era. It's a different story. Like, we are constantly reminded, hey, guess what? The Jedi are kind of in the wrong on this one. Not kind of. After this episode, they're very much in the wrong on this one.
And they are and they aren't, which is, again, this is still this dichotomy of the Jedi. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. I really like a lot of that. And then there's also just a couple of weird choices along the way. I think the weirdest choice in this all is still the pacing of everything. The pacing of this individual episode is a little weird. Nonetheless, the pacing of this entire season. But even still, I'm kind of interested because this definitely means that whatever finale we're getting next week is not going to be what we thought it was. It's not going to be. I don't even know if it's going to be a traditional ending to this story. So I'm interested, at the very least, to see what that is. Whether that's good, bad, indifferent, I don't feel like putting a judgment call on that at this time. But even still, I think this week's episode did give me what I wanted out of the second flashback episode. Seeing those same moments from the different perspective, this one especially being specifically on Soul. I actually liked Torben in this, at least Torben's decisions on this, of he is an apprentice, he is... Frankly, he reminds me a lot of Anakin.
Yeah.
Where he is very self-centered. He does not care for the mission they're on. He just wants to go home and will do whatever it takes to get there. And that is eventually, we know, to be his moment of growth and kind of his defining moment for who he becomes. Where he is willing to take the poison and kill himself later. I guess later on in timeline, earlier in the show. Because that's how timelines work.
This flashback does a lot to pay off his decisions, like the amount of blame that he ultimately put on himself, or the fact that he knew he couldn't keep this. At the end of this, the Jedi are in the wrong because they're covering up what actually happened, and it really fucks Torben up in the head. But for me, the weirdest thing about this is, like, some of the actions are justified, and some of it's like, why did Soul stab the mom?
That was the biggest weird one for me.
Doesn't explain. It's like, I was going to let her go. Like, no shit. Like, oh my God. A lot of it just didn't make sense. And just,
I very much took that moment as like this. And mind you, there is no explanation for this. We do not know why he stabbed her. But it just took me as he saw crazy powers and just acted on instinct. It
was fear more than anything else.
Exactly.
He was letting his emotions take control. The other thing, too, is like, as the penultimate episode of this season and potentially this series, there is way too much lore dumping happening here versus other episodes of the show. We learn about the Virgins. We learn about the hyperspace disaster, which is why there's all this spaceship parts scattered along this planet. Like, there's too much happening here for this to be the penultimate episode of the season. There needs to be more explaining why we are where we are, why these characters are the way they are, why you've got this stranger, the mystery dude who still hasn't confirmed what his name is, so I don't know what to call him.
Manny. We just say Manny.
Manny. But like, there's so much left unresolved. I really hope this next episode is a longer one, just because this didn't do enough for at least me, in terms of a story, the way they've been telling the story of setting up what the events are going to look like in the finale.
Yeah,
and that's a problem.
My only thing on it is I just want to reserve judgment before seeing the finale on that, because they could pull something that is amazing. They genuinely could. That's what's so interesting to me about this show is it's such a wild card in every possible way. For me, I feel like we're in a suitable place of why characters are who they are at this point for pretty much everybody but Manny's character.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with like where May's at, where Osha's at, where Soul's at. Soul especially a lot, like Soul's entire character. I feel like we see his full character arc now.
The one character I'm still hoping to see more from is I can't remember her name from the last episode. I'm just pulling it up. Vernestra, yeah, because like doing a bit of reading into the expanded universe and what Vernestra meant to the Order at this time, it's just like there's such a badass character here, and we haven't seen that wholly, played out in this show, and that for me is a bit of a
see, I'm fine with that. Since Vernestra's badassery is very much coming from the books that are canon. Those stories are there if you want to experience them.
Yeah.
Frankly, this while she's in this story is not about her. She's just a fraction of the whole here. I hope we get more with her because it's cool, and like frankly, I want to see more of the lightsaber whip.
Yeah.
But like, I think her badassery is shown enough in that episode 6, where it's like, okay, we know not to mess with her. we know how powerful she is, and even throughout the rest of it, like we know she's basically stuck dealing with this political game for the Jedi.
And I think also knowing that Hanella M. Culpepper, who directed episode 6, is directing episode 8, hopefully we see some of that carry through. Because we talked about that with this episode and episode 3, that they were sort of paired together. They were written together, same writer's room, same director. So I expected a similar vibe. And I do appreciate the storytelling mechanism of same story, another perspective. I think there's a film that shall not be named in a very popular series of young adult novels become movies that does a similar thing with flashbacks and just shifting perspectives on it. And I thought this was really well done. I really love that storytelling trope, and this does a really good job of using it. It just doesn't feel right as the penultimate episode of this show, unless the next one is like an hour.
I still think they could do
compared
this
to these
with the
30-minute
same-
episodes.
Again, I think they have to do something crazy, but I do think they could do it in the 30-minute episode timing.
You shall see.
Like, I very much can see this show just ending with May is going to the dark side and Osha goes to prison. Or no, Osha goes to the dark side,
Other
May
way
goes to
around.
prison. Like, I could totally see them doing
we'll
that.
figure it out by the end of the show. I'm sure.
No, we won't. We've been terrible
we
about
will
it
not.
all the way through.
Not a chance.
It didn't help when she cut her hair to make them look exactly the same.
No, but one of them has the swirly thing.
I do love that was a
matters.
whole conversation in this episode because it had to be, because we can't tell these characters apart. But a couple of things I do want to highlight that I really actually enjoyed in this episode, apologies for the burp,
That's all good.
is there's two things in particular. First off, everything with the witches I loved. I've already loved these witches. All of the, like, actually seeing them use their magic in this episode was awesome. I loved it, especially seeing them using bows and arrows in this was very cool. Seeing them all using, like, after their leader is killed, everyone banding together to possess Kelnanka
Yeah,
was super cool.
Like, even going back to the bows and arrows thing, like, Torben definitely went to the Anakin Skywalker school of lightsaber twirling, because like
totally.
he put some work in. That looks so dope. And it's,
So
like, just
much
seeing
of
the
that
yellow
was
saber
so
live action was
unnecessary,
so cool.
but so cool.
It was better than some of the Anakin twirling. I'll give you that.
I have to
and
give a
then
shout out to
see-
this show with its lightsaber use of lightsabers. Like, lightsaber, I think this is some of the best lightsaber combat has looked.
Oh, the one episode where the stranger just mows everyone down is probably the best lightsaber duel we've ever seen in Star Wars.
Even this one with Kelnaka and Torben and Soul, I thought was excellent.
Wookiee Jedi, baby. We finally
got it.
We finally got a
Like, that
Wookiee
was-
wielding a lightsaber.
That was the other big one for me. Is I was so disappointed when we got to Kelnaka and Kelnaka was killed off screen. Like,
Yeah.
we did not get to
I'm
see
glad we got
Wookiee
this
Jedi, and now we did, and it was actually pretty badass and awesome.
And again, it gives more context into why he went into isolation. He was ashamed of the events that happened. He was ashamed of the possession. He was ashamed of the fact people had to die for this. So he yeeted himself.
I think it's interesting on that of the, like, him and Torben both feel that shame. Soul is trying to make up for his actions with Asha, and then Indara, who was kind of the, like, you should have fucking listened to me, but you
And
didn't.
now I'm going to cover for your ass.
And now I got to cover for your ass, and she's covering up until her death. Like, I like those choices they made for these characters and how they showed all of that off, and it makes a lot more sense for everything we've seen so far in this. I think my only concern at this point is just how do you wrap this up? Whether it's in this next episode or in another season of the show, I don't know. But what we have here, I think, in this episode is cool. I like the Virgin stuff too, like Virgins to the
No, I
Force
thought
and-
all of that lore was really interesting, and I want more of that from this era. It just felt weird to get that in the penultimate episode of this season.
I think
and
also like a
while
lot
I-
of. Sorry, you go.
I was just gonna say, while I hope there is subsequent works in this time frame or more seasons of this show, the fact that before Andor came out, we already had confirmation that they were going to be telling a story over multiple seasons, and we haven't had that same conversation for this worries me a bit, and that we won't see more of it. But I hope to be told I'm wrong someday.
Oh
somehow.
yeah. Um, what I think is interesting here is how this is kind of coming back, and this is where I think it will come back, which to that ending, which is the power of two. Um,
Kind of odd for Star Wars, but
well, the power of two being this very important thing to the Sith. Of there are always two. There was
yeah.
always master. There is always apprentice. Um, but not necessarily master and apprentice. The two could very well be Asha and May. The two
Sure.
could be one of them in Manny Jacinto. It could be one of them in Soul. But using that and then the rendition of Power of Two as the end credits theme song or end credits song. Um, and it being very similar to that chant that we heard as the end credits song in the first flashback episode.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool, really awesome stuff. I love weird shit like that. Like,
Let's just hope the
do
weird
that.
shit resonates and we get more of this time frame or more of these characters specifically, whether it be in live action television, live action film, animation, books, whatever it might end up being. I'm more curious and interested about where these characters go or where they're coming from than maybe the sum of the package that's been presented here through these 7 episodes.
Yeah, I mean we have the news that we are getting a new Star Wars animated series soon, likely
We
to
do?
be. Yeah, this news just came out.
Oh, I missed this.
Likely something that could maybe be announced at D23. I could.
Did they so the panel list came out for D23. I don't know
Yeah,
if there was anything on there about Star Wars
I'm
animation.
like quickly scrolling through it. Oh, here we go, Lucasfilm. Oh wait, that's not like a panel or anything.
Oh yeah, one day ago, Lucasfilm was officially working on its next Star Wars animated TV show.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I'm just looking through the all
This is just coming from a job posting. It could be, yeah, who knows what it could be.
Yeah. Yeah, looking through some of this
I did
stuff.
put the D23 stuff in Discord somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the link you sent me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So am I.
Because I know we have the Marvel animation sneak peek, which will be very interesting. But yeah, the
Yeah,
Disney
you gotta
Entertainment
think that's
Showcase.
You gotta think that's Spider-Man and maybe What If season 3, maybe
What if
zombies.
season 3? I would say definitely zombies.
Yeah,
And probably something we haven't heard about.
ideally.
But you know, this one here, the Disney Entertainment Showcase happening on Friday. Obviously, folks will do an episode talking about all this stuff.
Because it's us, of course we will.
Yeah.
That is happening August 9th through the 11th, for
Mhm.
those who are not aware.
Like, I can totally see them being like, there is more to this story. Let's talk about it. There is more to the High Republic. Let's talk about it. This does feel like just the first bit in the drop of a bucket. And I feel like the High Republic is the next place for Star Wars to go, with how much stuff we have in like the prequel eras. We are pretty much done there. We don't really need much more story there. We have so much already. And the same goes for during the original trilogy and that space between the original trilogy to the beginning of this sequel trilogy. I feel like if you're really wanting to expand Star Wars at this point, you go into the sequel trilogy or you're going back to the High Republic. And I'm interested to see what comes next. I think like we have all this stuff coming up soon that's going to wrap up that in-between era. So,
I mean, we've got James Mangold's film that's like about the first Jedi, right? I know that's not quite High Republic stuff, but like we're going to explore some weird timelines or some weird time periods in Star Wars mythos, and that's honestly what's most exciting to me about, Star Wars and the future of Star Wars.
yeah, I like this. I like where this takes place, where this lands in the mythos of Star Wars, and just its place within Star Wars content in general. I think this is a great show. I really do. I just think it's messy, which I don't think is necessarily a good or a bad thing. It just
is a thing. Yeah, I think in terms of pacing and delivery, it's fallen short of my expectations, but in terms of the Star Wars stories that they're setting up the potential to be able to tell in this era, that has me more excited than anything else happening in Star Wars right now.
Yeah. I want to specifically say the things of like what we're saying here is like these aren't these insane opinions. I feel like Star Wars fans are doing the Star Wars fan thing again, with this.
Star Wars fans hate all Star Wars things.
This is not perfect, amazing 10 out of 10, so it is the worst thing ever in existence. Because that's what Star Wars fans love to do. It's not. It's actually not bad. It's actually even pretty good, but it's just not perfect, and I don't think it needs to be.
I don't think there's anything about Star Wars that will ever be perfect, to be honest. This is, I think, the closest we've gotten to Star Wars being, quote unquote, like, not even progressive, but something that, like, I don't even know where I was going, honestly. Like, Star Wars has never been good. Star Wars has always been campy, space, soap opera, pop fiction stuff, right? And it will continue to be that. Different tones, different vibes, different creators coming in and doing their thing. We've got the Rian Johnson trilogy, which I still really hope happens because The Last Jedi is a great movie. We've got Sean Levy, who is best known for working really closely with Ryan Reynolds, the director of the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine, is going to be doing a Star Wars movie. That Taika Waititi movie, I would love to know what that's going to be. We know we're still getting Skeleton Crew is happening. That's shot. That's in the Mando era, but
that is frankly probably our next Star Wars project.
I wouldn't be surprised. We've got the Grogu Mando movie. We've got James Mangold's prequel movie. Like, there's a lot of. We've got the Rey movie. A lot of really interesting stuff in the pipeline, and I'm hopeful that we're not just going to overload on Star Wars, and they're going to tell some really interesting stories in this universe.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that, I hope that we continue to get more stories by different types of people. Like, I love Leslie Headland taking the realm on this. I want to see more of what she can do. I want to see what more people can do with Star Wars. So this still gets my full hell yeah, I'm glad this exists. But with that, who the hell knows what's going to happen next week, man?
We're going to find out. We're going to talk about it here. That's all I can guarantee at this point.
Which we will be excited to do. Of course, folks, you can catch that next week. But until then, Mitch, where can people find us?
At the YouTubes at D+Us is probably the best place because we're both really bad about keeping up with social media. But Griffin's all over the internet at GriffyDpad. I'm in all the places at Mr. Mitch George. And the podcast is everywhere you can find it at D+Us.
Yeah, go check it out. Go check out our other episodes. We will be back next week. But until then, bright suns and have a magical day.
Oh, look, a dog.